And then there was some, in the system we gradually moved to look more at the quality. One very important thing was, I don't have today very much about the teacher education model, but we created a new teacher education model, which was aimed to be very high quality teacher education model, also focusing on changing the whole idea of teacher profession. And one important aspect of that was increasing autonomy for schools and teachers. And then also that was related to the idea to develop a trust-based model in the system, so that if the teachers are highly educated, if they have a kind of very high professional identity, then it is possible to trust them, and we don't need this inspection, and we do need high stakes testing. But the whole assessment system was developed from different point of view, so that the assessment was not controlling teachers and schools, but the assessment was developed for supporting the pedagogical development. So that then the solution was that we gradually developed a model that we in a relatively intensive way made sample-based tests. They can be achievement tests in the school subject, or focus on motivation, or focus on learning skills, learning to learn skills, and also functioning of the classroom processes, or the kind of pedagogical leadership in the schools, and this kind of aspects. And this idea is that the leading school authorities, they do not get any detailed information of individual schools. They get this kind of average information, and also the schools get the same average information, and then they can themselves, the teachers themselves, compare what is happening in our school or my class, and how it is related to the national average in some subject, or are these features typical in my schools? What could be made better? So that the main idea of the whole evaluation system is to help schools to develop themselves and teachers to develop themselves. And that's quite different from the high stakes testing idea, where it's the controlling aspect, and also the kind of avoiding or punishment aspect very dominating, and we try to avoid that. And I remember I was vice chairman of the evaluation council when we reorganized the national evaluation system in Finland, and the first council was founded. And we carried out many these kind of sample-based evaluations, and our media, the leading newspapers, wanted to get detailed information that how well individual schools are doing. And then we said that we don't analyze that. And then they hired lawyers. That okay, we have to give, because there's the kind of model in Finland as administration have to be open, so that media has right to get detailed information about administration. But we thought that okay, but this knowledge doesn't exist. We only have the average results, and this information, school-based information, doesn't belong to our task, so that we cannot give this kind of information what doesn't exist. Of course it existed, but still finally they didn't get that information. But this only shows that it's not so easy in the societies to maintain this type of model, because the idea of controlling and presenting rankings and so on, this is so strong tendency also in our country. Then we had a lot of work on this research-based development of the quality of teaching learning processes. Now what I'm going to talk at the second part of my talk then is give some ideas how that has happened in the field of mathematics. And then one important thing was that after this first development step was more or less has been more or less successful, this building the equality, we noticed that the way how knowledge is defined in our curricula, what kind of ideas of learning there is in the system, and what teachers think about learning is not the most advanced one. So that there was in 70s, 80s, 90s a lot of very intensive research in the world about the learning processes. The whole notion of learning developed very much when we think about this higher order learning, the deep learning approaches, and we in Finland we organized a very intensive discussion. Researchers were leading this discussion, but it went to practically all schools in the country, where we discussed about the conceptions of knowledge, conceptions of learning, and introduced this kind of general awareness of the deep learning idea. Okay, and there the focus moved a little bit from this just teaching different pieces of knowledge, and focus moved to learning skills, strategies, cognitive strategies, and metacognitive skills, and these became a part of the official curriculum relatively early on. Of course, they are nothing new nowadays. In every country, these things are highlighted in curricula, but we pushed them quite early in this system in Finland. And then development of learning environments, use of educational technology, and then focus on motivation and student welfare came more important parts of it. So, okay, this was now kind of a description of this background, which more or less created. Now one important aspect was missing from this presentation, but it's such a long story. The teacher education model. We already discussed before this started that there are some people interested in the Finnish teacher education model, but in the discussion we can come back to that, so that I couldn't deal with that in this more.